Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart, the most successful of the Golden Age pirates. But what about the Bartholomew of Fate Grand Order? How well does he compare to his historical counterpart? And what grade would I give his depiction? Let's find out. Bart is a rider class servant, and, well, he rides a ship, the Royal Fortune. Actually, there were a total of 4 different Royal Fortunes during Bartholomew's career as a pirate. Basically, if he found and captured a better ship, he would move into that one and rename it the Royal Fortune. The largest of these, however, the second Royal Fortune, had to be abandoned after crossing the Atlantic, and so he moved to a different ship in his pirate fleet to make that the new Royal Fortune, later finding another larger ship to capture and rename. So contrary to Francis Drake and Blackbeard, whose flagships were one single ship, Bartholomew Roberts just named whatever ship he was captaining the Royal Fortune, and so had several of them. Obvious choice for a rider-class servant here. Next up is his character design, which is actually a pretty good one from a lore perspective. The historical Bartholomew Roberts was known for being quite fancy in his dress. It was his main vice, since he actually didn't drink very much, preferring tea to rum. While his appearance in FGO isn't an exact match for Bart's depiction in paintings and other media, it still gives us that impression of a man who likes to look good. Indeed, he dressed in his fine clothes for battle. One thing that stands out among his design, though, are the crosses. He's wearing a cross necklace, he's got crosses on the hem of his pants, and that big scarf in his third ascension has crosses on it too. What's this about? Well, Roberts was a Christian, as most British pirates tended to be. It's what they grew up with after all. However, Bartholomew was notable for taking this a step further. The musicians he kept upon his ships would regularly be ordered to play hymns, but not on the Sabbath. He made sure that there would be that day of rest each week. And, as already stated, Bart was unusually sober for a pirate. This will come up again later, but Bartholomew Roberts was atypical among pirates in a number of ways. Anyway, this is a very solid design. Moving into his skill set, Bart's first skill is Voyager of the Storm, increasing attack and MP damage for all allies for 1 turn. Seriously, this is what I get for making pirates a grouping to vote for in an earlier poll. Almost all of them have this skill that is meant to represent one's ability to handle a ship on the high seas. Roberts, though, was the commander of an entire pirate fleet, so his A+ rank of this skill is tied with Drake as being the highest among all the servants who have this skill. Generic, but a great choice. Robert's second skill is Pirate Gentleman, decreasing his Stargather rate, but increasing the critical strength of all allies for 3 turns. While this skill name does sound like an oxymoron, it is still trying to say something about Bart that made him stand out from most other pirates. I already mentioned that he had a thing for fine clothes, but Bartholomew was also known for maintaining a code of conduct among his pirate fleet that included not just rules, but benefits for members of the crew. More on this later. While I do find the skill name to be a bit silly because, well, he was still a pirate, but the idea that Roberts was different from your typical pirate is very solid. Lastly, Bartholomew's third skill is Swift Pillager, increasing his quick card effectiveness for 3 turns, decreasing the crit rate for all enemies for 3 turns, and as a star bomb too. Bart's career as a pirate captain lasted around 2.5 years. During that time, however, he captured at least 470 ships, making him by far the most successful of any of the Golden Age pirates. One of Bart's most notable heists was off the coast of Brazil, where he came across a fleet of 42 ships awaiting the arrival of their escorts. Bart seized one of the ships, had its crew point out which ship among the fleet had the most booty, and then took that ship, acquiring a massive haul of gold and jewels meant for the King of Portugal. This was just one of many of Bartholomew's successes, but it drives home the point. The man knew how to get treasure, making this a solid skill choice. Bartholomew Roberts' noble phantasm is Black Dirty Barty Howling, whereupon he reveals to his target that they are surrounded by his pirate fleet, then bombarded by all of their cannons. This MP does damage to all enemies, with bonus damage to low-rarity enemies depending upon overcharge, and decreases defense for all enemies for 3 turns. The idea here is that Bartholomew used his pirate fleet very effectively against merchant ships and weak opponents, but had much more difficulty against experienced Navy ships that he came across. It was a fight with a Royal Navy ship that cost him his life, after all. As for the name, Black Bart was his most famous nickname, though that is just the English translation of the original Welsh, Barty D. The howl is presumably the sound of all the cannons being fired, but this is more a guess on my part. While the name might be a tad confusing, the concept of Bart summoning his pirate fleet to overwhelm a foe with fire is a good choice. Robert's craft essence is Pirate's Rule, depicting some handwritten documents laid out upon a desk, presumably having just been written. I mentioned before that Bartholomew Roberts was a bit different from the usual pirate, and one of the most notable ways he was is that his pirate fleet was much more disciplined. I mean, they were still pirates, all about having a good time and all that. But after an incident where one of his captains ran off with a ship full of loot, Roberts got together with his crew and created a code of conduct for all members of the fleet. It included things like shares of the loot, keeping one's weapons in good condition, no gambling or fighting aboard the ship, and even insurance money for those who were crippled during their voyages. Bartholomew Roberts was far from the first pirate to create a pirate code, but his was very notable for keeping his crews disciplined and capable, mostly. One rule about not drinking past 8 p.m. was poorly enforced, and would ultimately lead to Bart's downfall when a Royal Navy ship appeared while much of the crew was drunk. This is an excellent craft essence. Getting into his characterization, Bartholomew Roberts played a notable role during the first half of the Atlantic Lost Belt, Atlantis. You meet him quite early on in the story, where he tells you about the situation in the Lost Belt, the advance party that made its way to Olympus, and making it very clear that he has a thing for eyes being hidden behind people's hair, or mekakure. Seriously, he brings it up pretty much every time he meets someone new, like it's a normal way to greet someone. Bart may not be as creepy as Blackbeard was in Okeanos, but it does detract from the character. When the first thing people remember about a character isn't pirate fleet captain, but hidden eyes fetish, you know something has gone wrong. But I did say Roberts plays a notable role in the plot, and he does. In the extremely dangerous waters of Atlantis, where you have an insane sea god, a massive hostile fleet, and an orbital killsat with a laser strong enough to wipe out entire islands, Bartholomew's ability to use his ship to quickly and stealthily transport Chaldea is essential. Later on, during the final battles in Atlantis, he again plays a critical role in pushing through the enemy fleet to reach Nemesis Island, and so allowing for Orion to shoot down Artemis. Bart does disappear just as you arrive at the island, but he is satisfied that he was able to succeed in his mission despite the heavy odds stacked against you. Despite him not really being a pirate during Atlantis, since the real Bartholomew Roberts was known for being an excellent sea captain and incredibly bold in action, it still remains in character for him. As for Bart's interlude, it actually is a pretty neat dive into the idea of how pirates chase their dreams, but so often their lives were cut short before they could be achieved. You end up teaming up with Roberts, Blackbeard, Anne, and Mary together to take care of a singularity. Not that you didn't know this already, but the interlude makes it clear that all of our Golden Age pirate servants are more than a little kooky. Blackbeard with the otaku stuff, Bartholomew with the mekakure, and Anne and Mary for getting distracted. That does seem to happen to them a fair bit, but I'll save that for their video. But it's Bart that makes it past the traps and dangers, while the other pirates walk right into them. While there is ultimately no treasure at the end, Bartholomew is unfazed, knowing that there will always be more chances to pursue dreams and treasure alike. As a whole, I'd say that his characterization is pretty decent, at least once you look past his weird obsession. As you might expect, there is nothing in the historical record about Bart having some interest in hidden eyes, and they even admit to this in his character profile. But when you look at his actions during Atlantis and his interlude, Roberts, oddly enough, seems like the most capable of the Golden Age pirates. He doesn't fall for obvious traps, pushes on towards his objective, and ends up succeeding in both cases, despite the fact that, in Atlantis, he's having to face off against Odysseus. Granted, he's not alone there, but I doubt that Blackbeard or Anne and Mary would be able to survive against an enemy of that caliber. Bartholomew manages to hold his nerve long enough for Charlotte to carry out her plan, and so ensuring victory, at least for that part of the marathon of difficult battles that is the Atlantic Lost Belt. And now for the verdict. What grade would I give Bartholomew Roberts' depiction in Fate Grand Order? Well, it's pretty decent. His design, skill set, and bond CE are all good. Not perfect, but then what is? As for characterization, this is where Bart is a little more mixed. If you look past his obsession with hidden eyes, what we see is a brave and dashing sea captain who was able to face danger and push through despite the odds. The battle against Odysseus in Atlantis is the best example of this, but even in his interlude he ends up being the most level-headed of the group of pirates you're with. His weird obsession with hidden eyes does hurt him a bit, but at this point I'm thinking that the developers have just decided to make all of their pirate characters a bit off in some way. Also, similar to the case with Francis Drake, we haven't really gotten to see Bart do anything particularly evil. Weird, yes, but looking at the handsome pirate gentleman with a hidden eyes obsession, it might make you forget that this is supposed to be a man who began his pirate career by sacking the island of Principe, killing much of the male population as they did so, an act of revenge for the murder of the previous captain. I guess that's just something we deal with in the Fate franchise. In order to enjoy the characters they come up with, some of the darker aspects of their characters end up being glossed over. I mean, if we dug into all the gory details of some of these characters that we have in Fate Grand Order, many of them would turn out to be completely unlikable, you know? And so for a final grade, I'm going to give Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart, a B. Despite his weird obsession and that we don't see much villainy in his depiction, he is still probably the best depicted of the pirate characters in FGO. And as a side note, I'm happy to say that he is the second to last character with the skill Voyager of the Storm. So if you are tired of seeing that skill in these videos, we are almost done with it. Hooray! And if you would like to learn more about another very successful pirate, or rather privateer, check out my video on Francis Drake here. Until next time.